Good morning. We are in a new venue. Hopefully the technology will serve us well. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Combined Authority Housing and Communities Committee, and welcome the members, particularly those who are substituting today, to Lucy, to John and Samantha. We've got a public question in a minute, but I will first come to the minutes. So item 1.2 is the approval of the minutes of our last meeting on the 6th of October. We're being asked to confirm them as an accurate record. Does anyone who was at the meeting want to raise a question of accuracy? No? So are you happy that I sign the minutes? Okay. Okay, thank you. Then I think on the action log, was there anything that members wanted to raise? No. So then I'll take us on to public questions. We've received a public question from Debbie Craxton, and its copy of the question is on our website, and also an answer when I provide one will also be added. So I'd like to welcome Debbie, who is logging on virtually. So here's our first technology test of the day. Are you there, Debbie? If Debbie isn't, I will read out the question and then read out my answer. So we're just giving Debbie a little time in case that we can involve her. So Debbie's asking a question on community land trusts. Ah, good. Can you see us, Debbie? We can see you're on the line. Can you hear us? And can you unmute if you want to ask it?
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can. Well done. It's like we're connecting to a different planet, but thank you.
Okay, great. Just one second. Let's see if I can pull up my Thank you so much. So my question has to do with community land trusts. The Combined Authority has announced that existing CLT projects and commitments will be reassessed against a new set of principles to be developed and debated. Can the Combined Authority confirm whether these principles will include the need for legitimate community engagement, transparency, and democracy within those CLT projects and commitments? Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. So assuming I don't get too much sound interference. So thank you for your question, Debbie. I'll just give you a reasonably full answer. So just by way of introduction, the Combined Authority has a key objective on the delivery of additional affordable housing. And that word additional matters because there's obviously a lot of delivery by district to the benefit of rural and urban communities, including delivering as much as we humanly possibly can of the 70 million plus of government initial affordable housing funding by a deadline of next March. So working closely with providers, local councils and local communities, that's our plan. And also, of course, with the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities. So we're continuing to work on that in the future and we'll be seeking further funding. So specifically, the words you quote are from the Housing Principles report that came to the last Housing Committee on the 6th of September. But as the minutes of that meeting will show, there was, whilst there was a strong vote in favour of those principles, the majority and therefore the committee didn't agree to them. So the minutes record the comments also of people. So I wrote the principles document, including Principle 6 on community supported housing schemes. The total wording of that principle reflects my views as portfolio holder and also the mayor's, but they're not currently the combined authorities. They also chime with the mayor's and the combined authorities' commitment to 3Cs, compassion, cooperation and communities. So just as update, the leader of East Cambridgeshire, and East Cambridge is represented today by Councillor Ambrose Smith, has written to the combined authority about taking back responsibility for those community land trusts that are in East Cambridgeshire, which reverses a change that occurred at the end of 2019. And that means that the combined authority itself has no active work currently on developing community land trusts in East Cambridgeshire. Community housing support is now being provided by East Cambridgeshire District Council. But more positively, in terms of our role, a fuller report on both past and future combined authority work on community land trusts and what we're also terming broader local community supported housing, because there's quite a lot of self-build, there's cooperative housing, there are different models. We'll come to the next housing committee in January. So we believe there's a consensus in favour of the combined authority continuing work on community supported housing schemes, but allowing local authorities to decide local delivery. And so no new combined authority initiatives will be undertaken without the support of the respective local authority. I expect that report will propose the engagement of an experienced and principled, respected, independent consultancy with expertise on community land trusts to advise on schemes that the combined authority will get involved in. And I do stress your points in your question, Debbie, that will include legitimate community engagement, transparency and democracy. It is important, and this is mentioned in the Community Land Trusts UK network website, that these are rooted in the community and that they work democratically. So that new set of housing principles, that report will cover community land trusts, and then in addition there'll be a new set of housing principles developed probably later in 2022 by the combined authority, because until we get new funding, there is a limited, wider agenda compared to what we're doing on other housing. But we do want to support the delivery of community land trusts and affordable housing into the future. Thank you, Debbie. Sorry it was a bit long. I don't know if anybody, does Debbie have the right to a supplementary point? Yeah. So I don't know, Debbie, if you want to have a supplementary question or make a comment.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for that. I'm especially glad to hear that, because where I live here in a village called Little Thetford, we have recently seen a turnover of our community land trust. We're in the process of rebuilding it as a truly democratic, truly village supported CLT. And one of the concerns that villagers had was being kept informed and actually having actual community engagement as part of the process at every step along the way. And that's something that was missing in the past. And so there were questions about whether it was created to be a vehicle for property developers. And in fact, here in the village, there's not so much opposition to CLT as a lack of transparency about what's happening. So the CLT here is just kind of reforming itself, and so we are excited at the prospect of having that true community involvement. So I was happy to hear your responses, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you. And I know, as I've talked to the mayor about these issues, that both the mayor And I believe this committee are committed to those principles, but we will we'll have the opportunity as a committee to look in more detail, Debbie, at that report. So I hope you get the opportunity to see the report that will be available probably about the end of December. And we will be discussing it properly at our next meeting. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if I can move on to the next item, turning the page, we've got an agenda plan and a forward plan. Are there any comments on the forward plan or what's coming up? No, I will move on. And then we have the return of Noel Godfrey, but this time in person. So we've got a report and assisted by the efforts of CAM Wi-Fi and a lot of initiatives that Noel has been behind. So can I ask you, Noel, to introduce your report, updating us on the review of Connecting Cambridgeshire's strategy?
Certainly, thank you. So just to put a bit of context, this is the forward strategy for 2021-25. The first strategy for the Combined Authority Digital Connectivity Strategy was devised and approved in 2017. But of course, the programme itself has been going for some time. And the strategy going forward is really building on what's happened before, with some new, more challenging targets going forward to make sure the digital connectivity keeps pace with technology developments. But some of the significant changes have come about. One of the things the pandemic sort of really highlighted and exacerbated was the digital divide, where it's become very clear that without access to digital connectivity, people are excluded from healthcare, from education, from jobs, and it's really been highlighted during the pandemic. So in addition to the 3 work strands around broadband, mobile, and using smart technologies to utilize advanced networks and emerging technology, there's an additional work stream looking at access and inclusion. One of the things that's really clear is that in social housing provision today across the whole of the UK, and our area is no different, there's a big gap between with access. So the targets going forward and the work stream going forward is to make sure that there's parity, so that in social housing there is the same level of access to digital connectivity as in market housing. In terms of broadband, we have very good coverage of superfast broadband across the county, across the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough now. The targets are to move forward with gigabit capable infrastructure, which has the ability to be upgraded and keep pace with other technology advances. And so we have a new target there to reach 85%. Over 85% gigabit capable coverage across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough by 2025. That actually matches the overall UK government's target for the country, but actually normally the way that it's aggregated across the country, you might have 90% somewhere, 75% somewhere else, and as a rural county we would probably be behind. So the intention of having an 85% target is to make sure that we're up there at the leading edge for the UK. We've also got targets around continuing to improve mobile. It's a really difficult area to make progress in, but we will continue with that. And then, as I said, smart technology, which is using Internet of Things and other technologies to look at emerging solutions to deliver technology-enabled flooding sensors, and other technology which can help us meet some of the challenges that we're facing with climate change and other things.
Thank you, Noel. Any questions or comments? Lucy.
Thank you, Noel. It is a really important area. It's absolutely crucial for the Combined Authorities goals and for lots and lots of the things that we need to achieve across the county in the next couple of years. And the pandemic has demonstrated just how important broadband is going to be in the future for home working and all of those kinds of things. I'm really interested in what you said about mobile being difficult. It feels to me as if actually an awful lot of the way people are going to be accessing the internet in the future is via mobile. And I would find it very helpful if you could outline a little bit why that's difficult for us and what we're doing to tackle those difficulties, because I think it's somewhere where we really need to be making an effort in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think the difficulties, I think probably all of the district areas, all the districts have seen some of the challenges and some of the difficulties with mobile. It's a combination of, there's government sort of legislation, there's an electronic communications code which dictates how mobile telecommunications is installed in this country. There have been a lot of changes to it, and there's some complexity in terms of legal liabilities and other things. So the mobile operators, in order to get coverage, need to put their equipment into different locations, in some cases mobile towers, in some cases on building rooftops. There's understandably public disquiet about the way that looks and the impact for people. So there's a bit of a paradox in the sense that people don't want mobile telephony equipment near them, but they do want mobile coverage. And that all has to be delivered in the context of a planning system that balances those requirements, which is really difficult. One of the other points is that the mobile technology is quite complex, and for people generally to understand, and specifically the planning teams who are trying to work through what should be approved and what shouldn't, it's not very clear. The mobile operators themselves operate on very tight margins with a very macro perspective about investment. So they don't look at a granular level at the impact for a local area. So there's a whole raft of these different complex issues. The approach that we're taking is a combination of mapping what's currently the current coverage and actually digging into that in some detail. Again, Ofcom do it for the country, but they do it on a modeled basis, not at a granular level. So if you speak to people from Ofcom, they have a look and they say, oh, it's pretty good in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, not really many issues. But that masks the fact actually for individual, there are lots of issues. So one of the things we've done is mapping and really digging into it, talking to the mobile operator, say, we've got problems here, we've got problems there. I'll just give you an example. It's actually not such an issue now, but it will be again. Before the pandemic, there's a real issue at Cambridge Station. We were getting lots of reports saying there's no coverage. Actually, it wasn't a coverage issue, it was a capacity issue. It's because of the flow through of people. And the mobile operators didn't have a very good view of that. So we were able to, talk to them in detail. And in that case, facilitate some upgrades there so that there was better capacity. But it needs everything to be looked at very closely on a case-by-case basis. In some cases, we need to lobby the government in terms of how they're applying the code and changes to the code. In other cases, we need to talk to the operators. And in other cases, we need to bring the operators and the planning teams and the operators together to get solutions that will work for everybody, which is hard, painstaking work. There's no simple answer. We just have to keep plugging away at it. And one of the things that we're actually looking to do in the next strategy, particularly, is bring in some more specialist telecoms resource to make that available to the planning team so that they can actually ask the right questions effectively. Sorry, it's quite a long answer, but it is quite a complex issue.
Lucy.
Yeah, I do. It was a really interesting answer. I think it's absolutely fascinating to understand what the difficulties are, and that sometimes it's coverage and sometimes it's capacity. That in itself is quite an interesting thing to know. I would be really interested to know how much the planning system is a problem and how much of it is just actually mapping and making people aware of where there are issues and where there aren't, and being able to get kind of some traction on fixing those issues. Because if it is the planning system, then actually as local government, there's more we can do about that. I mean, if it's an issue that the mobile companies aren't interested, that's a different problem. But actually, if the planning system is one of the things that's slowing down this coverage, that's definitely something we should be looking at quite closely.
It's actually a really horrible combination of all three things, that, you know, all the things that you've mentioned, which is partly what makes it difficult. The mobile operators have, you know, they don't have a commitment to an area. They have a commitment to delivering against their targets. So they might have an investment amount to upgrade to greater capacity on 4G or 5G, for example, and they'll look at the areas and it's wherever's easy, quick and easy to do it. They don't say, well, we're worried about that area. So so keeping them kind of involved and interested in their area is one thing. There are definitely issues with the planning, you know, from a planning perspective, but they're not simple issues. And planning is never simple, unfortunately. So yes, it is that combination. It is working on all of those points, I think.
David.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Noel. Thanks for the report. Very interesting. It's a follow-on, as you say. I'm worried about the £6.3 million. Is that sufficient? Is that really sufficient? Because of all what has just been said, and you've said, I really doubt it. Can you expand on that?
I mean, that's always a question whether you can do more with additional resources. But some of the work that I was just explaining in the context of mobile delivery, it's also the same with broadband. So there's a certain amount of public funding intervention that's needed, and actually the 6.3 million, you know, that's coming in from a local perspective. I think in the report I did flag that for broadband we're part of the we're in the pilot stage of the government's Project Gigabit, which is looking at putting public funding into those areas that will not be commercially viable. And that's, we believe, in the region of 40 million that will come in from government to do that. So the 6 million is only a proportion, and it's just the combined authorities sort of contribution to it. So there's an awful lot more going into digital connectivity. So yes, there's public funding needed to provide funding for the gap between commercial and non-commercial provision. But thankfully, you know, that is coming in from government, and that's why it's very good, I think, that we're in the pilot area, because we can get some of that funding coming in early. But also a lot of digital connectivity, of course, is commercially funded, and there is an awful lot of commercial activity happening in the moment. One of the things that we, you know, what we can add as a program is making sure that some of that is successful, that actually the broadband providers who want to come and deliver commercially here are able to do so in an effective, efficient, and quick way, so that they feel it's well worth them continuing to invest. And it's just definitely, I mentioned the difficulties in the mobile market. In broadband, it's actually there's an awful lot happening at the moment, an awful lot of investment, and what we want to do is kind of harness that for this area and make sure we get as much of it as possible. So I'm sure we could always do more, but public funding is always constrained. And as I said, a lot of what we need to be doing to support this strategy is a lot of painstaking work, bringing people together rather than big capital investment. So proportionately, I guess it might not look like a lot of money, but in terms of it's really a catalyst for a lot of other investments coming in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Noel. You've answered the second question I had. So regarding your position is actually bringing those people together, facilitating that to make it work. I still ask the question of 6.3 million, but perhaps you'll tell me in 2 years' time. Yes, thank you.
Can I just follow up a couple of issues? I mean, I having had fierce debates about 5G masts in Cambridge, not yet over, how is it possible, or is there a way you could assist in there being a discussion district by district? Because first of all, councillors have got very little knowledge about how this all works. And second, they just come in as individual applications. So we might have about 12 different 5G mast applications hanging around, some of which might have been turned down. There's some of it is permitted development. Wouldn't it be useful if there was a proper discussion district by district about exactly where a group of masts is going to go? Because at the moment it just appears from just the minor position of a senior councillor to be a complete mayhem out there.
Yeah, yes, I agree, and I've seen that those issues. That's one of the reasons why we would like to bring in specialists, telecommunications expertise in the context of planning, so that we can actually do that. Look at it district by district level. Try and actually engage the operators to think about it in those terms, and to give a lot more information. Obviously, people have very strong feelings about 5G, but there is an awful lot of misinformation, and it's actually making sure that people have accurate information and then can make up their minds from then, rather than, as you say, not having the clear facts. So, but also understanding what the plan is. Having one mast application coming in 1 month, then another, and not understanding how it works together is really difficult. So that is exactly the kind of things that we plan to be doing.
Well, that would certainly get a lot of support, I think, certainly in the very different needs of rural and urban areas as well. Anyone else want to John?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I mean, looking through this, it is fundamental for the growth of the whole of the area of combined authority, isn't it? That we have this really good digital connectivity, whether it be broadband or mobile. And I think that the problem you just highlighted there is the difference between certain locations of whether they're commercially viable or not as well. In Cambridge, obviously, it's a lot potentially more viable. And then actually in the rural areas, they're going, well, how are we going to recuperate some of that cost, which is where I think some of the additionality in the funding will help in that area. I think it's a good paper. I think the interesting point is on the planning one, as you are quite right, it all comes in individually. And of course, all those individuals within the planning departments, the local authorities, they've got different issues, especially with certain different types of locations and buildings as to their uniqueness in certain locations. And I think it would really help if that was that discussion and looking at the overview of what's going to happen as well, especially when you're talking about some of the exceptional buildings within the whole area that we've got, where some of those buildings are the highest points, which will be most beneficial. But of course, we've got to be very mindful of the impacts that has on the visibility and locality, combined with the need to have this to move forward to the growth of the whole county, especially now it's all moved. But thank you.
Thank you. Lucy again.
Sorry to come back. I absolutely agree with what's just been said about the need for more information about why masts are going, where they're going, and a bit more kind of joined up communication about what's being done. I think my personal perception is that one of the reasons why there is sometimes quite a lot of resistance to the 5G masts is that they seem to be going in places which appear to have perfectly reasonable coverage anyway. And what we would really like the mobile companies to be doing is fixing the spots where there isn't coverage, and they seem to be very keen in putting in mobile phone masts where we think it's fine. And I think that some of that is probably about kind of ordinary members of the public like me in this particular case, not understanding how the network works, why it matters that you have kind of upgrades in some areas. But I also think it would be helpful if the companies themselves were willing to explain a bit more about what they're doing about the gaps, because those are the things that are really annoying people. And if we can see the 5G network as something that helps in the gaps, I think there'd be a lot more support for it. But at the moment, it just appears to be going in the places where actually everything's fine. And that's kind of a problem. And I think my personal perception is that there's a little bit the same feeling with quite a lot of the broadband work, that there's a lot of energy going into getting gigabit coverage in places which already have quite good coverage, and not quite enough effort going into getting coverage in the places which don't have much at all. And again, that's probably because that's the way kind of ordinary people see things, whereas I'm sure it's more complex than that. But I think getting some more information out and communicating that, not just to councillors, and clearly we could do with some more communication, but also out to the rest of the public about the way that the network works and what is being done to cover those black spots, I think would be really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, and one of the things I should have highlighted before is that whilst within this strategy we have, area-wide targets and plans, the other intention is to work on district plans with dashboards, so that taking the point that several members have made, that actually you've got unique challenges in particular areas, and you also got you've got particular issues that you need to reflect. And I think actually having a focus on those local areas, as well as sort of backed up with sort of cross-cutting targets and plans, is the way to make sure that we're actually hitting all of the things that are required, rather than just some of them. That's the intention anyway. So certainly working very closely with district colleagues to create the very local plans with the dashboard, so everyone can understand the specific areas, exactly what's happening, exactly what the issues are.
Any other comments? Just as a conclusion on that discussion, would you have the time, I know you're very busy, just to drop a line to the members of the committee about some of the issues on sort of planning? Because I think if each of us take it back within our councils, both via the planning officer, head of planning, but also who had the leads within our councils, I do think that if, we have got very different communities, and I take Lucy's point and other points people have made, that really we're so detached from the process that we just need to really just sort of provide a bit more of a lead within our districts. But if it was possible, as a second request, if it was possible to convene a discussion with a couple of representatives of the people that want 5G to happen, both urban and rural, then I do think that we'd get a couple of councillors from each council attending. And I do think it would help the councils just sort of respond. I think at the moment it's a mess, because it's done application by application, and the public is left behind because it's so complicated. So who knows whether you need a 12 metre or a 20 metre, or what position you put it in. And I wasn't aware of the point about Cambridge Station until you told us it. So would that be possible? Yeah.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, very
So I
happy
think if you could just see if there's an appetite from the investors, because I think, coming back to your point, the 6 million doesn't sound a lot, but when you think about the hundreds of millions, David, that the private sector's putting in, particularly in broadband, which is going in a way better than the Wi-Fi, then we just need to almost be focusing on trying to get better out of the hundreds of millions that has been invested.
And to a certain extent, Chair, the £6 million percentage that could be wasted if we do not get that.
That's an even better point, in that we obviously want to. But I'm sure it's not. But I think the way the multiplier effect is not being gained. So thank you very much, Noel. I will take us to the recommendations on page 19. Do I have a proposer and seconder? John Nish, and a seconder, David Ambrose Smith. So that does then link to the budget and the proposal that the Combined Authority commits £6.3 million. So can I have all those in favour of the recommendations, please? And any against? Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Noel, for coming out and for a very clear response. So I then move on to the next report, which is on agenda item 3.2 on page 51. Could I ask Roger Thompson to introduce the report on implementation update on the affordable housing programme?
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report that comes to each committee. In terms of things that have happened since the report at last committee, most importantly, we've had the letter. We had it just before the last committee, but we haven't been able to report it to you, from the Minister, confirming that he's prepared to support an additional £18.7 million worth of capital funding for the programme that we have proposed for the year 2021-2022. This will bring the total amount of money we've received to support the affordable housing programme to £73.7 million. We have attached in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 the two programmes. So Appendix 1 has the, if you like, the original programme that's in delivery that started on site before 31st March 2021. Appendix 2 has this year's 2021-2022 programme. We've been talking to our provider partners. Now we have some certainty about funding, about the schemes that we had proposed originally back in April and May to government. And there are 6 schemes that we believe, well, not believe, we are certain, will not be starting on site within the current financial year. They're listed in the table at the bottom of Appendix 2. Slightly fortunately, those 6 schemes are not the larger schemes that we have in our programme, although they do add up to approximately 187 units. With £7.4 million worth of funding. They're not proceeding for a variety of reasons. 3 of the schemes have got specific engineering issues that will not be resolved on the timescale that we require. There's some urban design issues we know on at least one of the schemes, and there's also some issues with land ownership and transaction on a couple of the other schemes. So we have lost 6 schemes, which on the face of it looks like bad news. However, within what we requested from government, we also asked them to give us the capability to substitute schemes in and out of our programme. That was agreed, and there was a process put into place around substitution. And committee may recall that at the last meeting in September, they actually approved a substitution scheme in the hope and anticipation that we would get that approval from government. So that substitution scheme, which was the scheme with the 2 development sites with Halo, is now in our programme, as it appears at the bottom of the table at the top table in Appendix 2. There is a further substitution paper coming before committee today, which Asma will be presenting after this item. And we do have some other proposed substitution schemes in our sort of visibility, in our pipeline, that we are hoping to bring to committee for the final guillotine on any new schemes on the 10th of January. We hope that if those schemes that we see at the moment do come through, then actually our numbers will be pretty much what we projected they would be for the whole year, if the 2 schemes that we're hoping to see coming through on the 10th of January do indeed proceed. So there's a bit of shuffling going on with the pack, but hopefully the numbers and the expenditure will be very close to what we told government. The rest of the delivery, we've had some schemes starting. We have got good visibility. We think of the start dates now for the other schemes in the programme. There's probably another one actually that may have started ahead of the meeting today, but we haven't got it in our paperwork. So we are confident about seeing the other schemes start on site. 1 or 2 are still subject to planning. But we are told, and when we challenge the questions about planning, it sounds like there is a programme and a solution to securing planning to enable start on site by our timescales. In terms of other implications within the report, prospects beyond March 2022, it's a very good question. Government pointed us in the direction of Homes England. There are, I believe, some meetings, certainly I'm party to one of them, in the diary with Homes England around how the Combined Authority might engage with them around a continuous market engagement process. So this would be the sorts of schemes where they've obviously selected their strategic partners for the 21-26 programme, but they're only the biggest builders and schemes in the country. What happens to the smaller and medium-sized schemes? And they go into this Homes England continuous market engagement process. So how we can engage with that and be part of that, we hope to be able to advise at a later date of that, but those discussions should be starting in the next month or so. Looking beyond that, we are also contingent in terms of our ability to deliver the programme and having the funding on receiving the repayment from the 5 loans in the loan book, which members who have been committee previously will be aware of. So we have given an update under section 3 of what that loan book performance sort of generally looks like. It is pretty similar to what we reported last month, in that 4 of the 5 loans seem to be running pretty well. The developers are slightly behind with some COVID issues, but we're very confident that they're going to complete the developments, repay the loans, and with interest within the timescales permitted under their facilities agreements. The one scheme that we flagged previously, and we need to continue to flag, is the MOD scheme at Ely, where the sale of the affordable housing has still not yet completed. That is quite a significant sum that will get repaid against the loan. We're being told that that should be completed now by the end of January. But it has slipped previously, and it'd be nice to see that money come in. There was originally some slippage around the sale of the market units, MOD Ely. There has been some sales, as we're reporting in the report, since committee last met. But I think that probably means that they're not falling further behind. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're catching up. However, that loan doesn't have to be repaid until 31st March 2023, if I've got my years right. So we just need to continue to monitor the performance of that loan, because we do need to see that money coming in order for our finance team to have the financial capacity to make the grant payments as projected in our grant payment profile. So I'm very happy to take questions, Chair. One other thing just to mention, because it was in, I think, the recommendations, we have had two schemes with a couple of minor changes. They're referred to in the report. They are in the recommendations. This is where schemes, just in terms of their finalisation, have found that they've had a very small number of units drop from the original numbers. The grant rates are not affected by that. It's just prorated, but it's just a notified committee that there's been a couple of changes from what was reported to committee previously.
I've got a couple of comments. Before that, I need to declare an interest in that my partner's a board member of Crosskey Homes. So I need to declare it now, because there is at least reference to them in this report, and then a proposal later on. So the general point, just on a minor addition to Roger's pretty full introduction, is that if you recall, just before the last housing committee, which seems like years ago, we had only then had the response from MHCLG approving the 18.7 million, and then in conjunction with Roger and officers, we had a meeting with what I should properly call DLUHC, and forget what's in my head, which was pretty much them telling us what the game was. And it is a significant effort from officers, and we have to pay tribute to officers for the amount of resilience as well as the workload, because from a position of being able to put this program together from September only just passed, with the need to get the shovels in the ground by next March, is a major pressure. So I certainly would back up on Roger's overall point, is that we are doing an extraordinary effort in such circumstances, assisted by providers, councils and others. I do think we've just got to be cognizant of the fact that we are trying our absolute utmost to get these schemes started, but it's against a challenging background. So yes, we will continue to bring forward the reports, including 2 reports which we hope to bring forward in January, and clearly continue to monitor. So I'll make a couple of comments later, but can I just take any questions or comments? John, and then David.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. If we might try and bring a bit more clarity to the government's view on us. I mean, I appreciate that might not be possible, but given the comments made at 2.15, it seems to suggest that the government has actually changed its attitude about the funding methods for combined authorities in general, rather than just us. Could I just get some clarification on that? Have they actually stopped the current method of funding via combined authorities? Because the next paragraph suggests that we're being pointed essentially back to Homes England for funding. So, and in that context, is that the combined authority dealing with Homes England, or is that a reversal to the district councils actually dealing directly with Homes England? Thank you.
Important question. Roger, you respond and I'll add to that.
Thank you, Chair. So in connection with the first point, I think the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority was slightly unique on the original devolution deal in getting money, bespoke money allocated for housing on that deal. Most other combined authorities didn't get what we got directly. Manchester got a slightly different deal, a very interesting deal, where they got effectively funding for an investment fund that they were using to stimulate housing in the Manchester area. So there were sort of three models out there. One was you don't get anything. One was us. We get money primarily used for direct intervention, but we're getting money ourselves direct. And the other one was the Manchester model with their investment fund. Have things changed? Yes, it appears so, in that they're telling us they're not going to give us any money for a further program that is like a mirror of the existing program on our patch. So that looks like that's a change. And as we've said, that looks like they're pointing us in the direction of Homes England, and we don't know how that, at least I don't know at the moment, how that is envisaged working, and therefore what our role might be in that.
So each council can apply to this continuing market engagement funding. No council was successful as part of the big bid funding that I think allocated 6 or 7 billion. So I think there is an opportunity for the combined authority to assist discussions and also discuss with some of the larger providers. And I believe that given the extraordinary affordability crisis in different forms in different parts of the county, we should continue to push that dialogue. It was clear when we met DLUHC that that it is a Homes England game, and also if people looked at the budget, there was no new money for affordable housing this year, partly because a large sum have been put in for a period program last year. So I think the combined authority is not out of the game, and it should continue to support councils. I think councils might sometimes ask, what is the combined authority for? Well, I think it is because we're better when we do present a common voice on issues like affordable housing. So we've got different markets, different challenges, but I think we should continue to do that. And I think we should look to discuss with the larger housing associations and providers on our geography the concept of putting forward 4 or 6 schemes. Now, those schemes can be bid for individually as well, but I do think it helps make the point. And I thought DLUHC were quite helpful on the substitution, and I do think that some of the work that we've been doing, assisted by the efforts of Asma and Nick and Roger, have borne fruit, given the fact. But I just think there's still that benefit of having the discussion. So we'll feed back to the committee the outcome of an early discussion. There has been a positive engagement with Homes England. They do have an interest and knowledge about Cambridgeshire, including because some of the people involved have worked in our geography. So, and I do think we should seek, in addition to the help that we have got from DLUHC, to just to keep them in the loop, because it was a specific that we asked for in the original deal, and it remains one of the key challenges, along with transport and several other things. Lucy.
Thank you. I think Roger's
Be right on the microphone. No? Let's swap microphones.
Is that better? Yes, much.
It might have
Quite
been me
loud.
not switching off. Apologies.
I think it was that thing. What I was, oh no, it thinks I'm Roger, but we're quite close, it's fine. The thing I was going to say, I think it's really interesting.
It's not Roger or a kitten, it's Lucy.
Going back to housing, what Roger said about the Cambridgeshire model being quite different from other combined authority areas, I think is really interesting. And I just wondered whether the combined authority have done any work looking at the impact of the money that we had on delivering affordable housing in comparison with what happened in other places. Because I think if we are going to go out and argue that we would like to do more of this, the first thing to demonstrate is that it has had a useful and beneficial impact. And I'm not aware whether that work has been done or not.
Roger, I think we're all, it's like we're in a fast moving ocean ship, and our priority is deliver what we said we would do. But your point's important, and Roger will respond.
There was some work done prior to, I think it was sort of January, February 21, before the March 21 program ended, around value for money, because there was a question we were getting from MHCLG at that time about value for money. And we did give them some data back around that. Now, we didn't get that much response to that, because actually then sort of events took over. They closed the program, the previous program, March 21, because there's the dispute about the dates, but then offered us this extended program or new program for this year. Yeah, we believe we had quite a good value for money argument and set of data, and I see no reason, Lewis, why we shouldn't make sure the committee sees that for next time. Yeah.
So I mean, I think if you look at the intervention and impact is high. It has been driven by the £45,000 cap. So inevitably, we've gone to parts of the county, broadly the northern parts, and to some extent, the south has suffered, but not because of the efforts of the combined authority, simply because relatively arbitrary rules, albeit well-intentioned from government, about getting the best for the money that's been put in. So I think we do need to evidence that, and I do think that starting on so we've got one further go in January, but probably the first committee meeting that we've got after March, which will be somewhat challenging in that we are looking backwards and looking at what we've decided, will be the time to basically assess where we're at. Just while I'm speaking, I think it's important just to share with the committee that effectively DLUCH plan to sign off the programme at the end of March, and for then onwards it will be for us to account for what is being done internally. And within that, recovery of the loan funding is vital, because that does pose us, if we don't get the loan funding back, we're on our own after that date. So the management of those loans is critical, given that every 40,000 we don't get or is delayed significantly could be one unit of extra affordable housing lost.
So I was just going to say to you, just in terms of a little bit more on the value for money thing, in section 213 on the report, we have identified that the average grant rate on the whole programme is actually below £40,000. It's running, we think, at £38,300, which so we think that is actually going to be pretty good value for money.
And I would say I'm grateful for the civil servants for their responses, because we, within the constraints of a programme, because this is how government operates, they do set programmes for 4 years, and certainly we've had a practical response in the last month, and that has enabled us to do as good a job as we can. But there's still, as you'll see from the report, there's still some uncertainties. I'm sure the team has dug deep into what's going to be happening in the next few months, we are not keen to have to forego any part of the 18.7 million. And we have got 2 further significant schemes coming forward in January. David.
Thank you, Chair. Roger, you mentioned very briefly and very quickly planning permission. There are in fact some projects still without planning permission. We only have a very few months to go to spades in the ground. How many do you have which you're waiting for planning permission? And do you have projects you can bring forward from other areas in a timely fashion to meet this March 2022 deadline?
Thank you for that question. I can't give you the exact number off the top of my head on how many of the schemes still require planning permission. The standout one is Northminster in Peterborough, because that's the largest scheme that we have in the programme. I know there's been a slight reduction in the numbers that are being proposed at Northminster as part of the pre-planning process. So that's the biggest risk, if you like, out there, I think, to our programme. And DLUHC are aware of that. So it would be reassuring for us to see that Northminster was progressing through a planning process, although obviously we have no influence over that, and we just have to sit and wait and wait for that outcome, because it is the largest scheme.
Do you have a, thank you, do you have a time scale for when you should actually jump in and say this has gone far enough, or we're not going to progress this in a timely fashion?
I think every scheme, and Asma and Nick are sort of talking to the providers and developers. Every scheme has its own sort of profile and issues. The trick for us is to try and stay on top of it, and if we think something is falling over and going to fail, then trying to, we can't intervene with the process on any individual scheme. What we look at is our substitution process. But we are running, if we're being blunt about this, we are running out of time beyond what we are having now, and we can see now with hopefully 2 schemes coming in January for any other substitution. So if a scheme, for example, that might be projected to get planning in December doesn't get planning in December, I think we're going to really struggle to find a substitute at that point, and therefore those units will just have to drop out of the programme. So there is some risk attached to that. We think and hope that from what we're seeing, we'll deliver what we're articulating in the report you've just had.
So yeah, the Northminster scheme's a big scheme, but I think Peterborough have got an incentive because the viability of it does depend on the start. Yeah, we get down, I think, to the definition of what's a start, and I hope that that will occur. I mean, it was good that that DLUHC, I'm going to do it simpler, did give us this substitution right and flexibility, but on a scheme like Northminster, there just isn't the kind of substitute. So we will look to the providers to get it done, but it is close to the wire. But I think just recognizing the timescales of pressing the go button on a number of things at the September committee and getting them started by March inevitably involves risk. But so there's no risk to public money, but there is a risk that we will lose affordable housing. But everybody will be making their full endeavours, and there are some really entrepreneurial and good schemes in the recent list. I've kind of tempted Steve to contribute.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't feel the need to contribute because your analysis of the situation is perfectly accurate. There is planning coming forward. The scheme has been amended slightly, but it's on stream to kickstart when it needs to. So I don't think there's any worry on it. Thank you.
And I look forward to coming to see it, because it will add near to 300 units, particularly for younger people in an affordable environment that meets exactly the kind of market that is out there. John.
Thank you, Chair. I think just briefly, I think from a concern from a locality, it's actually making sure the pressure is still kept on by those local providers to ensure those planning matters or reserve matters in the cases of some of them, because some of them have outlined planning permission for quite a while, but they seem to be quite slow at resolving the reserve matters issues that are in there. And actually it is down to the providers, I think, to make sure they really do push that and get that information through so that it can be dealt with. Otherwise, as you say, we could lose them at the last minute because they just haven't provided that information to get the planning passed. Overall, I think there's always a disappointment. We've lost some money out of the scheme, but pleased that we've managed to claw back, shall we say, almost some a reasonable amount in compensation, I suppose, and it will provide, hopefully, if timeframes permit, a good amount of affordable housing, which is generated across the whole of the area, isn't it?
Again, we're aiming to get as close as we can to that original 2000 agenda. So I think there is a point there about planning. So whilst none of us around this table, I believe, hold sway in that land, it may be that Roger may get in contact with a member of this committee and just see how we might chase in case that has an impact. Okay. I take us to the recommendations on page 51. Do I have a mover and seconder? I'm just proposing to take them on block unless someone has a problem. Lucy, right, Lucy and David as seconder. I'm sorry, my eyes move from left to right, otherwise you would be a mover. But you are a seconder, which is just the same. So if I could take those recommendations on block, can I see those in favour, please? That's unanimous, and thank you. And I do thank the officer team for the amount of work that is at the bottom of all of this, and just the resilience, because just not having any certainty about quite a lot and having the expectations of delivering a complicated program. So I'll move on to item 2.2, and I'll invite one of the key members of that group to introduce this report, Asma. Oh, I need to say that there are exempt appendices for this item, and I think it might be just my pages that say this one is also called 2.2. Oh no, it's right. So if you feel that you want to discuss the exempt appendices, then I will take us into the exempt session and go through the proper formalities of that. Does anybody know that they want to discuss the detail that's exempt? Don't feel that you're precluded from discussing it or raising it if we get to that discussion. Okay, well, I'll work on the principle that we're going to talk about the covering report informed by what people know. Asma, could you introduce this report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I introduce Gloucester Centre, Morpeth Close in Peterborough. It's a site which has 100 units on there, and 30 of those units are captured as a Section 106. 34 units are for market sale, and the remaining 36 are being brought forward as additionality and will be substituted to the CPCA housing total in return for the loss of Station Road, Littleport, Ely, which was unable to proceed and progress initially as we first thought. The tenure mix for the 36 units from the Cross Keys site of Gloucester Centre is 10 units for affordable rent and 26 for shared ownership. The grant is 1,438,000 for 36 units, replacing Station Road, which was 1,448,000 for 39 units. The Gloucester Centre grant is fractionally higher overall on each unit because of the new shared ownership leasing model. DLUC have agreed to substitute this in principle once it's been approved by our Housing Committee today, the 3rd of November. The site is contracted to be developed with partners of Cross Keys, Vistry, and needs to be in agreement by no later than January 22. This is an old redundant former hospital site. The mixture of units is 1 to 4 beds, and the average grant rate today is short of 39,944 per unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Asma. Any questions on this scheme? So it's an additional scheme in Peterborough, and it substitutes for an Ely scheme, which sadly wasn't doable at this stage. John.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just clarify what it means when we say that the ministry has actually approved this, or at least accepting it as being acceptable as a substitute? Does that mean that they have actually reviewed the business case and they consider that it actually has met all their criteria?
Richard wants to come in first.
Yes, so we have a process that we've agreed with DLUHC around substitutions. Because we saw this one coming, we got this application into them earlier in the month to say, look, we want to propose a substitution. There's paperwork, application form that runs with that. So they've had all that, and basically we've had the answer saying yes, subject to our own approval at this end. They've effectively signed off on this substitution. Yeah.
Okay, Lucy.
I was just wondering why you've chosen that tenure mix, whether there was a reason why it's shared ownership and that number of shared ownership and the, is it 10 affordable rent? What led to that being the split that was decided?
They've just provided me with that tenure mix that they could provide on that site, I'm afraid, so I can't really give any more detail than that. But they said it was going to be 36 affordable. A 10 mix is based on viability for that site.
If you want to have a look in the appendices, you'll see the viability case. But I'm not saying that's not. I mean, I think it's a judgment, and yeah, Crosskey are entrepreneurial in the sense that they are in a position to provide a substitute for one of their own schemes. So there is a significant developer in terms of this affordable housing area. Any questions? Okay. So I'd take us to the recommendation on page 65. Anyone willing to propose? Samantha, thank you. A seconder? Steve, okay. All those in favour? Thank you. And thank you for all of the work that's been put in, and thank you for your time today, committee members. We have a further engagement on the 10th of January. So I hope you can all make it, or those of you who've kindly been substitutes today, and I thank you for keeping us quiet. You will be able to remind your normal representative, but we would be welcoming of whoever your council sends. Thank you. I hope you have a good journey home. And we will update people if there are specific things to share, but we expect that we will continue to make progress and be back in a venue to be advised at the beginning of the new year. So I wish you a Merry Christmas, and I look forward to. All right, it's a bit early then. All right. So and we will see some of you in the interim. But anyway, thank you for your inputs. I look forward to seeing you back in the new year. Not a question of speed, it's